Tonight you're mine completely. You give your love so sweetly. Tonight the light of love is in your eyes. Whoa, but will you love me tomorrow? Is this a lasting treasure? Ooh, baby, or just a moment's pleasure? Can I believe the magic of your sighs? Ooh, 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 ooh. Will you? But I'm going to start with this essay right now, okay? It reads, I still remember the first time I heard James Baldwin's writing. It was my freshman year of college in Honors English 1. Part of the reason I remember it so clearly was because despite that class, I hated that class actually with a particularly strong passion. For no other reason than that the class began at the ungodly hour of 7:45 a.m. Typically, I sat there feeling like I was at the bottom of the sea. I'm sure you all know that feeling. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as I struggled to shake off the night's sleep or sometimes the previous night's hangover. My professor, Dr. Hill, an erudite white woman in her mid-50s, who had the habit of speaking like an overeducated valley girl while popping what smelled like watermelon-flavored Bubblicious chewing gum, was giving a lecture on the subject of the self-narrative as a site of social and personal healing. She had taken a workshop on the topic, and she had declared that it was like totally transformative and life affirming, you know? The topic seemed of particular interest to her, and her curriculum included books like James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. Now, there's no doubting the considerable literary talents of these authors. And while I found their narratives heart-wrenching and oftentimes beautiful, I personally could not find transcendence in their pages. I realized this was because I struggled to relate with their stories. Furthermore, the books were primarily written in the early and mid-20th century, and I think my knowledge of America's struggles with racism and also the world at large's struggles with racism at the time that those books were written isolated me from their worlds. These books spoke only in passing, if at all, of the lives and struggles of African Americans and what bearing racism and privilege, including the writer's personal privilege, had on the overall society. In short, in Kerouac's longing to journey through post-Whitman America to find God in the American man, I could not imagine that American man resembled my grandfather, who at that time was, his citizenry was nebulous, to say the least. I remember taking this concern to my teacher, who expressed a very deep apology for not adding diversity to her reading materials. We had a wonderful conversation about literature and race, and she proceeded to tell me about a totally bitchin' black author named James Baldwin, who she promised me she would add to the curriculum. The next day in class, she read his essay from the book The Fire Next Time, where he is explaining the pain and the inevitability of racism, but the need to love and understand in your oppressors, which was a letter to his 15-year-old nephew. My life was forever changed. I went to the bookstore that day and bought everything I could find. Baldwin's words were like fire. The dulcet clarity of his literary tone, the almost didactic, sermonic authority with which he spoke, reminded me of the preachers I had grown up watching in the pulpit, breathing life into the often prosaic and convoluted biblical verse and casting spells over congregations. But instead of the gospel, Baldwin spoke of society's ills. His novels and essays have created a literary cavern inside which subsequent generations of writers have found a place to further explore the intricate and delicate balance of identity. As a gay, black, and relatively poor youth, in Baldwin, I found a literary voice that for the first time I could wholly relate to, and that was very powerful for me. In his vision of Harlem in the 1930s and 40s, I saw Akron, Ohio in the 90s and early 20th century. I saw hopelessness gray the eyes and sallow the skin of men who had once, a long time ago, been virile and full of promise. I saw despair hunch the backs of young women whose sense of worth seemed to bend and flicker like flames on the Midwestern breeze. Like Baldwin, it was clear to me saving myself would happen only through tireless and fearless examination of my own circumstances. And like my newfound mentor, I can only do that through writing. The work that I prepared today is all work that chronicles my own life and the social struggles that have formed me. I say very proudly that I'm a child of 90s era crack and hip hop culture. And for better or worse, the stark realities of that milieu are very present in what it is that I do. However, I hope that you can all find at least a piece of yourself here, no matter how different you believe yourself to be. I believe that we can all learn a lot from each other. And as Baldwin would say, I think not only can we learn from each other, but I think that we must. Baldwin frequently examined the social variables that serve to distinguish and polarize the human community. Ultimately, his greatest triumph was his eloquent and insightful investigation into the continuum that renders all human beings bound to one another. I do stand here on the shoulder of a giant, and I look back to my teacher now, Ms. Hill, and I say that I am transformed, and that she was right, that Baldwin is totally freaking bitching. Now this first poem that I'm going to read, I'm going to stand up. I don't pronounce this right, as Dr. Paul pointed out last night. I've been pronouncing it phonetically. What is it?
Botsivata.
Botsivata. I say it Bodhisattva. Botsivata. Which is basically the idea of empathy and compassion in the Buddhist religion, you know, the kind of manifestation of that. So this poem came from this is on wheels. This poem came from my study. I'm studying Buddhism for a while, and I kept thinking how much these words, these ideas, could enchant the lives of the people who I grew up with, but how far away from them it was, and how unfortunate that was. So this poem is Botsivita. I have searched for the Botsivata, in the eyes of a 27-year-old man who believes with his soul that he is living on borrowed time. But here, where so few make it past 25, alive or sane, I can't tell him he's wrong. I can only put my head on his shoulder and pray for us. See, there is no nirvana in these streets. Just sirens come, collecting the soft, white, crushed bones of little black girls thrown like dominoes, and sometimes it feels like mercy is transient as the wind, and we can't win. We make sorrow in the dirty laundry. We wear struggles on our backs like jackets that don't bring warmth. And we have forgotten them glory songs that subsided our ancestors as they twisted into knots under pastoral skies, singing about the promise of freedom by and by. Young man, 15 years old, his eyes burning blind bright like two suns on his face that looked so much like his father sometimes. His mother can't stomach to look at him. Already bears the mark of the beast. She tries to use her words to make the demon cease, but he tasted the flesh of corruption. Learned that for real niggas, the American dream is thug life, and he got that shit tatted across his belly. If he was a king, his crown would be the scar he wears proudly from when the bullet left the superficial wound on his dimpled chin. blunts to his lips. He palms a bottle of drive-through gin. He laughs when he's told that he's God within. He takes a little bit of smoking, exhales divine light, inhales a little more confusion, disconnection. I have searched for enlightenment upon the project tenements lit only by the pale orange of buzzing streetlights. I have burned incense and brought a lotus flower to the altar and said a prayer for the boy who sat by the memorial site of his 9-year-old cousin struck down by a bullet that flew through her living room wall. While she watched cartoons, no tears could bring back the souls of those lost too soon. And I did not know what to say when the boy asked me to help him pray. For me, too, God seemed so far away. But I sat there, lit by only candlelight, and tried to find a spark of divine in that dark, lonely song of a night. I searched for truth in places reserved for lies, was blinded by moths that pretended to be butterflies. I searched for the Bhagavad Gita in the midst of chaos bottomless like the sea. And in the deep, I found me. Thank you. There was some talk about the difference between what a nigger is and a black person is, and I always wonder what makes a person a nigger as opposed to a black person. So this is kind of my answer, kind of tongue-in-cheek rebuttal. It's called nigger cooker. What's the ingredients for nigger? What's the recipe? How much self-loathing? 1 cup, 2 cups, 3? And how much sweat do we measure by liter or quart? Add a touch of pressure, a little swamp water for flavor, or maybe just substitute with ham hocks. Butter or margarine, a sprinkle of pain and Afrobeat, pig's feet. How long does it need to simmer in poverty to make the meat tender? How much blood? How much is too much? How much before we make nigger soup? And is it appropriate to add copious amounts of Miss Dash and Frank's red hots and flour and animal fat to thicken the roux? How long does nigger need to stew? 100 years, 402? And would it ruin the blend if we mix some exploitation in, just a little prison time to make it prime? And of course some sugar, right? And not that organic shit, real enriched edible crystalline carbohydrates. You know, the kind of make it hard to concentrate, make a nigga shake. And after that, do we add a hit of crack? Then lard, bacon droppings, maybe some okra and or sassafras leaves, public housing, broken dreams, perhaps a little jazz, some hip hop, a pinch of downtown. But I'm sure after that, we put it in the oven around 350, then bake till brown. That was that. Okay. This is the bird's nest. Okay. Is there any question about this other poem before we continue by any chance? Okay. High above the stoic heads of urban capitalists in Brooks Brothers suits, with stains of detachment, nicotine, caffeine, and scotch on their breaths. Above the tired young mothers whose hips weave and soul shakes with each jagged step. Traveling against the craig-laced sky, lost in the white smog of America, Shihan soars on frayed feathers, jutting small black eyes, and swooping, sometimes, to the sullied city floor. Before he had his wings, Shihan lived on 125th Street in Malcolm X, lived in the big brick complex folks called the Bird's Nest. He would spend his days with his hoodie up and his eyes low to the ground, locked on the pavement when the popos came round. His universe stretched no further than the cluttered Harlem streets where he walked among the whores, pimps, crack fiends, and freaks. The happenings of that day are kept in silence, but they are kept. Nobody knows why, but the spirit moved that black boy, and he leapt. The image of the boy free-falling out the 7th-story window has forever rocked the minds and souls of them everyday people passing by on their way to here or there, the black apparition swooping through time and space and smiling without a care. But it was not the fall they cannot forget. The graceful and elegant, a kind of nephros pirouette. No, not the fall, but what happened next, the part that still haunts those spectators' dreams before he could hit the ground. Before he could hit the ground, that black boy grew wings. His head drew in, and so did his legs. his black face grew feathers, or at least that's what they said. Before he could hit the blacktop, before he could die, he turned into a pigeon and began to fly. Grad school programs, typically in America, don't really honor poetry programs, don't really honor black work much. Well, that's so general. It's not that they don't honor black work, it's that there's a particular kind of poetry that seems to be preferred in the academy. And I was told by an administrator at a certain school that if I really wanted to get in, that perhaps I needed to change the focus of my work. And so I said, okay. So I read the manuscript that comes from that school, and everybody was writing about flowers. And so this poem is my response to that, you know. And I remember that one particular poem was about John Keats. So I call this poem Flowers for John Keats. Here, we do not write poems about flowers. Not because we hate flowers, rather because there are no flowers. Here it's green, the sky is blue, so we are never short on view. But of the hues of May, one color here reigns, and while of gray we do not lack, we have had our fill of black. I have dreamed of tulips pink, gathering morning's tears in its horn, days adorned in dianthus, petals whole untorn, and evenings heralded by the majestic ringing of the foxglove bells. A field of willow beckon, and I am enraptured by their smells. Have danced in fields of jasmine, pure and white as cream, but regardless of grace or beauty, a dream, my friend, is just a dream. Here, there's no time for lavender. We only think of rent. No sunflowers to comfort us when the money's all been spent. I was on a bus, and there was a guy there, and he was wearing clothes that were noticeably outdated. That if you know like hip hop fashion, you would notice right away. Right? And he was explaining his clothes to a lady on the bus. Well, actually, to the whole bus. He had this way of talking to one person, talking to everybody, you know. And so he was telling her that he had just got out of jail. He'd been there since 2003. And that he knew his clothes were, you know, outdated, but this is all he got, because this is what he actually was wearing when he went in, and it was the only clothes that he owned. And he was telling the lady that he was going to see his mother, you know, who he also hadn't seen in a very long time. So I just went home, and his words were kind of just percolating, and I just sat down, and this is what I came up with. It's called A Free Man. The sun is a fiery peach, its golden light syrup sweet, pouring down on a free man, unbound, his own clothes on his back, a FUBU Fat Albert tee, a brown leather Carl Kanai hat, a pair of Air Jordan 3s, dirty denim jeans. He fingers the busted seams. Damn, he wished he could mend the broken dreams, ripped torn like labor from his mother, who sent him cards on every U.S. and Puerto Rican holiday, but never visits. Says it hurts too bad to see him that way. He writes her every day, and every time she responds the same, just 5 words. Take care of yourself, son. Knowing her for a lifetime, he has learned to read in between her lines, and he finds truth mostly in what she doesn't say, especially in the T. Always lowercase, shaped like a crucifix. He reads her constant prayers for his souls. In his mind's eye, he sees her growing old in her apartment, small and wooden like a pauper's coffin, spraying some potpourri, trying to keep the quiet, screaming stink of stale piss that lingers from the hallways and haunts her like a ghost, clawing in the night like mice, probably lingers like a poltergeist. She is praying over a white tea light candle to Saint Maria for release from years of resentment, hunching her back, crying only when no one sees, rubbing healing salts over her bad knee, her face bloated and hardened by the blues and diabetes. She knows the truth. Even out here, ain't nobody or nothing free. Her dreams went the way of her oldest son, strapped in a straitjacket. Somebody hop dreams up on lithium. Now her faith is on the run, and hear her youngest son say, "Mama, I'm coming home." But don't you know home is where the hatred is? Can't protect him from that 36 like she couldn't when he was a kid. Raise a flag for women like her. Worked their whole lives, ain't got shit to show. But sons who are marked from birth with signs that read, confuse or kill them, the better off stupid or dead. The flesh of her flesh misled, became slaves to the streets. 16 years old, Dylan, that sweet relief, got caught up in the usual traps. But now he's done his time. He's a prisoner formerly known as 512649. A son on his way home, back to his mother, he no longer really knows. She more like a dream, an apparition of charity. His only way back to the garden, he will seek refuge in the shadow of her wings. He knows in her eyes he will still be El Niño, a child untainted by his sins. He knows that only in that space that exists between the two of them can his father be revived. Big Daddy, black and angry, he sat in the living room like the Elephant King and told him about black men who had come from slaves and taught themselves how to make magic of their blues, and he strummed his guitar and pretended it's in tune, singing lonely songs before the night's weary moon, his voice raising like the lazy morning sun, honeyed and worn, yearning and warm, he'd sing, "I was born by the river in a little tent, and just like that river I've been running ever since." Dead of a heart attack at 36. Ever since his son been running in his jagged footprints. Big Daddy, who sang much more than he spoke. The mystery of manhood coded in Sam Cooke verse gone up in smoke. A father and son choked by 3 words neither could bring themselves to say. But all that died with his old man. Now the son stands with a Marlboro light in his hands, waiting on the greyhound, watching the landscape flash before his sleepy eyes. The day slouching painfully towards a throbbing and starlit night. This poem was inspired by another true story. It was a documentary that I saw called Valentine Road. It really struck me, not only because of the subject matter that I saw on the TV, but also because there were some parallels between that and my own life in very loose ways. Like, it was about a little boy who had been very shy and sullen and withdrawn. And something happened, and it changed his life completely. This poem is pale purple. That day, she had decided on purple eyeshadow, because she liked the way it looked on her honeysuckle skin. She had decided honeysuckle was the proper way to describe her skin tone after weeks of deliberation, during which time she considered both maple rose and cinnamon swirl. However, neither quite described her essence. She liked the way the purple contrasted with her brown eyes that her mother once told her were shaped like almonds that always made her laugh. She would sit in class sometimes and imagine schoolmates' eyes as nuts of different kinds. Some had walnut eyes, some pecan, a few cashews, but some rather unfortunate ones had peanut eyes. But Brandon was pistachio, because that was her favorite kind. Yesterday, she wrote him a letter and put it in his locker. It read simply, "Do you think I'm pretty? Circle, yes or no." She watched from her locker as he balled the letter in his angry fist, threw it, turned and looked at her and screamed, "I already told you I'm not a fucking queer." And she yelled, "I already told you, I'm not either. I'm a girl." A little girl lost somewhere in the maze of identity. It's not so much the wrong body you see as much as it's the wrong name, Larry. She's never been Larry, that shy boy, tongue-tied, sitting afraid on the playground alone. Never really been him, just stuck inside. Latricia was born when she put the shadow on her eyes, and the black-heeled boots almost knee-high, and his walk once lived in solo, replaced by hips that riff in jazz scat magic. Lithe as a cat, he is dead, and she has just been born, a junior high diva turned up fly girl, princess, priestess, Beyonce, protege, super goddess, supermodel, fierce, fabulous, and what? Today, Brandon will see who she really is on the inside. A California girl with a smile like a sunrise, with pale purple painted almond eyes and honeysuckle skin. A good soul with great taste in music, who dreams of being a fashion designer and a model, a veterinarian and a socialite. And maybe one day, even a mom. At school, she waits for him. She knows when he sees her with the purple eyeshadow, he'll know it's true too. And he'll be her prince and kiss her gingerly on her glittered lips. And she'll awake from the nightmare of having ever been a boy. She waits by his locker and smiles as he comes. She will have no time to scream when he pulls out that gun.